Volume 2, Part 13 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories, Volume 2, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by E.D. Godley. Volume 2, Part 13. These were the words of Socles, the envoy from Corinth, and Hippias answered, calling the same gods as Socles had invoked to witness, that the Corinthians would be the first to wish the Pisistratidae back, when the time appointed should come for them to be vexed by the Athenians. Hippias made this answer, inasmuch as he had more exact knowledge of the oracles than any man; but the rest of the allies, who had till now kept silence, spoke out when they heard the free speech of Socles, and sided with the opinion of the Corinthians, entreating the Lacedaemonians not to harm a Greek city. His plan then came to nothing, and Hippias was forced to depart. Amyntas, king of the Macedonians, offered him Anthemus, and the Thessalonians Iolcus, but he would have neither. He withdrew to Sigeum, which Pisistratus had taken at the spear's point from the Mytilenaeans, and where he then established as tyrant Hegesistratus, his own bastard son by an Argive woman. Hegesistratus, however, could not keep what Pisistratus had given him without fighting, for there was a constant war over a long period of time between the Athenians at Sigeum and the Mytilenaeans at Achilleum. The Mytilenaeans were demanding the place back, and the Athenians, bringing proof to show that the Aeolians had no more part or lot in the land of Ilium than they themselves and all the other Greeks who had aided Menelaus to avenge the rape of Helen, would not consent. Among the various incidents of this war, one in particular is worth mention. In the course of a battle in which the Athenians had the upper hand, Achaeus the poet took to flight and escaped, but his armor was taken by the Athenians and hung up in the temple of Athena at Sigeum. Alcaeus wrote a poem about this, and sent it to Mytilene. In it he relates his own misfortunes to his friend Melanippus. As for the Mytilenaeans and Athenians, however, peace was made by them between Periander, son of Cypselus, to whose arbitration they committed the matter, and the terms of peace were that each party should keep what it had. It was in this way, then, that Sigeum came to be under Athenian rule, but Hippias, having come from Lacedaemon into Asia, left no stone unturned, maligning the Athenians to Artaphernes, and doing all he could to bring Athens into subjection to himself and Darius. While Hippias was engaged in these activities, the Athenians heard of it and sent messengers to Sardis, warning the Persians not to believe banished Athenians. Artaphernes, however, bade them receive Hippias back, if they wanted to be safe. When his words were brought back to the Athenians, they would not consent to them, and since they would not consent, it was resolved that they should be openly at war with Persia. It was when the Athenians had made their decision and were already on bad terms with Persia, that Aristagoras the Milesian, driven from Sparta by Cleomenes the Lacedaemonian, came to Athens, since that city was more powerful than any of the rest. Coming before the people, Aristagoras spoke to the same effect as at Sparta, of the good things of Asia, and how the Persians carried neither shield nor spear in war, and could easily be overcome. This he said, adding that the Milesians were settlers from Athens, whom it was only right to save, seeing that they themselves were a very powerful people. There was nothing which he did not promise in the earnestness of his entreaty, till at last he prevailed upon them. It seems, then, that it is easier to deceive many than one, for he could not deceive Cleomenes of Lacedaemon, one single man, but 30,000 Athenians he could. The Athenians, now persuaded, voted to send 20 ships to aid the Ionians, appointing for their admiral Melanthius, a citizen of Athens who had an unblemished reputation. These ships were the beginning of troubles for both Greeks and foreigners. Aristagoras sailed before the rest, and when he came to Miletus, he devised a plan from which no advantage was to accrue to the Ionians, nor, indeed, was that the purpose of his plan, but rather to vex King Darius. He sent a man to Phrygia, to the Paeonians who had been led captive from the Strymon by Megabazus, and now dwelt in a Phrygian territory and village by themselves. When the man came to the Paeonians, he spoke as follows: Men of Paeonia, I have been sent by Aristagoras, tyrant of Miletus, to show you the way to deliverance, if you are disposed to obey. All Ionia is now in revolt against the king, and it is possible for you to win your own way back safely to your own land, but afterwards we will take care of you." The Paeonians were very glad when they heard that, and although some of them remained where they were for fear of danger, the rest took their children and women and fled to the sea. After arriving there, the Paeonians crossed over to Chios. They were already in Chios when a great host of Persian horsemen came after them in pursuit. Unable to overtake them, the Persians sent to Chios, commanding the Paeonians to go back. The Paeonians would not consent to this, but were brought from Chios by the Chians to Lesbos, and carried by the Lesbians to Doriscus, from where they made their way by land to Paeonia. The Athenians came with their 20 ships as well as 5 triremes of the Etrians, who came to the war to please not the Athenians, but the Milesians themselves, thereby repaying their debt, for the Milesians had once been the allies of the Eretrians in the war against Chalcis, when the Samians came to aid the Chalcidians against the Eretrians and Milesians. When these, then, and the rest of the allies had arrived, Aristogoras planned a march against Sardis. He himself did not go with the army, but remained at Miletus, and appointed others to be generals of the Milesians, namely, his own brother Cheropinus, and another citizen named Hermaphentus. When the Ionians had come to Ephesus with this force, they left their ships at Corycus in the Ephesian territory, and marched inland with a great host, taking Ephesians to guide them on their way. They made their way along the river Caicus, and after crossing the Tmolus, they came to Sardis and captured it without any resistance. They took all of it except the citadel, which was held by Artaphernes himself with a great force of men. They were prevented from plundering the city by the fact that most of the houses in Sardis were made of reeds, and those made of brick had roofs of reeds. Accordingly, when one of these was set on fire by a soldier, the flames spread from house to house all over the whole city. While the city was burning, the Lydians and all the Persians who were in the citadel, being hemmed in on every side since the fire was consuming the outer parts, and having no exit from the city, came thronging into the marketplace and to the river Pactolus, which flows through the marketplace, carrying down gold dust from Tmolus and issues into the river Hermus, which in turn issues into the sea. They assembled in the marketplace by this Pactolus and were forced to defend themselves there. When the Ionians saw some of their enemies defending themselves and a great multitude of others approaching, they were afraid and withdrew to the mountain called Tmolus, from where they departed to their ships at nightfall. In the fire at Sardis, a temple of Cybele, the goddess of that country, was burnt, and the Persians afterwards made this their pretext for burning the temples of Hellas. At this time the Persians of the provinces this side of the Halys, on hearing of these matters, gathered together and came to aid of the Lydians. It chanced that they found the Ionians no longer at Sardis, but following on their tracks they caught them at Ephesus. There the Ionians stood arrayed to meet them, but were utterly routed in the battle. The Persians put to the sword many men of renown, including Eualcides, the general of the Eretrians, who had won crowns as victor in the games and been greatly praised by Simonides of Ceos. Those of the Ionians who escaped from the battle fled, each to his city. This then is how they fared in their fighting. Presently, however, the Athenians wholly separated themselves from the Ionians and refused to aid them, although Aristogoras sent messages of earnest entreaty. Despite the fact that they had been deprived of their Athenian allies, the Ionians fervently continued their war against the king, for they remained committed by what they had done to Darius. They sailed to the Hellespont and made Byzantium and all the other cities of that region subject to themselves. Then, sailing out from the Hellespont, they gained to their cause the greater part of Caria, for even Caunus, which till then had not wanted to be their ally, now joined itself to them after the burning of Sardis. The Cyprians did likewise of their own free will, all save the people of Amanthus, for those two revolted from the Medes in such a manner as I will show. There was a certain Onesilis, a younger brother of Gorgas, king of the Salaminians, son of Chersus, whose father was Siromus, and grandson of Ulthon. This man had often before advised Gorgas to revolt from Darius, and now, when he heard that the Ionians too had revolted, he was insistent in striving to move him. When, however, he could not persuade Gorgas, he and his faction waited till his brother had gone out of the city of Salamis, and shut him out of the gates. Gorgas, after having lost his city, took refuge with the